If you spend any time at all in neurodivergent social media land, you've probably noticed this. When someone posts a video about their lived experience or their kids' experience being neurodivergent, there is always someone in the comments saying, "Oh, all kids do that. That's normal." And I just can't get over it. It bothers me a lot.
Yeah, yeah, always. I saw a post that said, like, we all pee too. If you're peeing 60 times a day, that's a problem, right? Like, just because we all do it doesn't mean there isn't a tipping point where it becomes problematic.
Totally.
And
And yeah,
that's
yeah.
the whole crux of the neurodivergent part.
Right. And people don't do this for other diagnoses or concerns. If someone is saying, "Oh man, my knee's been hurting me and it's not getting better," no one is in the comments like, "Everybody's knees hurt sometimes." They're more like taking the approach of, "Oh man, that stinks. I'm so sorry. What have you tried? Maybe you should see a doctor," or "How can I help?"
Right. Like, they're supportive.
Yeah, right.
And
And
yeah.
and not arguing with you about your lived experience.
Yes, yes. No one's like, I don't think that's actually what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, and everybody's knees do hurt sometimes, but you're going to assume that if they're bringing it up, it must be a bigger concern for them, or something that they need compassion or support around. You're not going to, like I said, you're not going to just dismiss their experience.
Totally. So today, let's talk about it. Why are these dismissive? But everybody does that. Comments. That was my snarky air quotes voice. Why are they so common in conversations about neurodivergence? Why are they problematic? And what do these comments miss about the neurodivergent lived experience? Welcome to Parenting Neurodivergent Humans. I'm Dr. Morgan Beidelman. I am a clinical psychologist, former school psych, former teacher, neurodivergent myself, and parent to two humans, one of whom is neurodivergent. And I'm Brianne Colpitts. I'm a school psychologist turned social coach for twice exceptional kids. I'm a mom to a couple neurodivergent kids and a late realized ADHD human, which means I'm double blessed with autism and ADHD. Thanks for being here. We're so glad you're here. Okay, so first, why are these comments so common? Of course, we can't know everybody's motivations and intentions, but I think a lot of these comments are rooted in ableism and fear of disability.
Can I add? I think that people don't realize that, though. I
Oh,
think,
for sure.
yeah, in my opinion, most people are good. Most people are kind. And if they are engaging in one of these belief systems or coming at a situation this way, a lot of times it's because they don't understand, they have a lack of knowledge, and they don't realize that ableism is the air they breathe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are living their lives and probably not in Googling what is ableism. That's probably
Hmm.
not a concept that the general public is familiar with. And I think that's a big part of the issue, right? Is
Hmm.
that we haven't paused to even think about how being dismissive is potentially ableism.
And why we're thinking this way. We can talk about ableism and disability, but we can also, I'm totally derailing us for a second, but we could also talk about it. And I think for the context of this, it might be helpful to bring in this perspective. We can also talk about ableism in the context of mental health, given the mental health
Mm.
crisis that we have in this country and the amount of adults experiencing anxiety, depression, the mental health crisis in youth. I think another way that we can realize that ableism popping up is, say that I'm a parent and I am juggling taking care of my aging parents and I'm taking care of my children and I'm trying to go to work every day and I'm struggling myself with anxiety and I start getting the shoulds. I should be able to do this. Why can't I just remember to da 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 da? Why can't I just blah blah blah, right? I should. Why can't I just all of that? That's actually another form of that ableism because we don't realize that when we're talking about ableism, we're talking through a specific lens of functionality, a specific way of living, and that for some, they can sometimes access that and other times can't, meaning maybe when illness pops up or when a mental health concern pops up. And then there's another group of people that almost never can access that without support or accommodation. Or maybe don't even want to access that with support and accommodation. They're choosing to live in a way that is more consistent with their lived experience, their body type, and their neurodivergence.
Right. And I think when people are making these comments like, oh, everybody does this or all kids do that, they think they're actually being reassuring. They think they're being supportive.
Yes.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
perhaps that comes from the idea that being wired differently or having a disability is wrong, or they're scared of that, right? They don't want to see that in themselves or in their family system, in their kids. And so their reassurance might be actually more for them and their own blinders to what potentially could be happening, and or they really just think they're being supportive.
Right. There's also the potential that in their mind, they're like extending an arm or a hand to the other person and saying, I'm like you, you're not alone. I think sometimes that might be the message that they're trying to send.
Yeah.
The intention is to connect with this person, help them feel less alone. And a lot of times, the reception, what is received by that person is, I don't think you realize just how hard this is for me.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And so it feels maybe minimalizing, or
Mm-hmm.
trivializing. And another tough piece about this is we're interpreting people's intentions with our own bias. This is one reason why you shouldn't have important conversations via text, because things will get lost in the sauce, especially
Mm-hmm.
for neurodivergent folks in our interpretation of people's intentions, their tone, just all the things. And so I think that could happen in the comment section too. I'm trying to give the benefit of the doubt here because I do get kind of triggered by these things sometimes. And I think part of that could be that people equate having a disability as people being less intelligent or capable. And yeah, I said what I said there. And, they're thinking, oh, well, this person can't have a disability because they can drive or they have a high IQ or they look so capable.
They're
But
quote unquote successful at X, Y, and Z.
right. But many neurodivergent people have average and above average intelligence, and we still have very noticeable strengths and challenges. And I think it's difficult because we don't all look the same and they're invisible. You can't see what's
Mm-hmm.
going on inside of us. And so I think people are making those comments potentially out of their own fear, insecurity, and not truly understanding what neurodivergence looks like. And like you said, there's so much struggling happening internally, potentially, that people can't see that. And so they might not be able to identify with it.
Yes. And, we've kind of talked about some of the impacts, but two additional impacts that I really want to highlight here are if I'm receiving the message that, oh, everybody's like that a little bit, again, even if it's a well intentioned message, if I'm hearing that over and over again, there's a very good chance that I'm going to start to think I'm the problem because everybody experiences it sometimes, but I am more than likely experiencing it all the time or often, and I'm only vocalizing it every so often. So, what I'm internalizing is there's something wrong with me because it happens to everybody sometimes, but holy smokes, it happens to me often, almost always, or always. And so I begin to internalize this message that I'm the problem. And it can also lead to a delay in getting supports, a delay in getting services because of either not sharing how impactful it is, or because people see you as so successful in these other areas and they're like, hey, so and so just get it together in this area. Right.
Yeah.
And so there's a mismatch in this understanding. And so there's an internalization that happens, a closing in on oneself. And then there's also a delay in the supports and services that might actually really shift the way that this person's able to function in their life.
Can I make a comment on that? Because
Please.
this might be wildly unpopular to say. And forgive me if I have ranted on this before, but Brienne loves a rant. I also feel like sometimes when we're using words, and I think we talked about this in the ableism episode where we talked about neurodivergence and getting a little bit deeper on being neuroaffirming and not fixing people. Anywho, I think also when people are like, oh, you just have a deeply feeling kid, or you just have a highly empathic person. I think those things can be true. And if we're not seeing it as like, hey, and I need support for my deeply feeling kid or whatever, then we might delay those next steps of getting the support that we need that help our kid feel better and help our family system run smoother. and just bring more peace to the lives of our people.
Yes, you did talk about that in that episode of what well,
Shocker.
but what I really appreciated about it, you talked about it in terms of your business and how you used to previously refer to the population that you primarily serve as quirky,
Yep.
and that you had moved away from that. And something that I had really taken from that conversation, and tell me if this is something that you were meaning for me to take away from this conversation, was there can be immense value in diagnosis because it can help get matching with the appropriate supports for your family system, for your child, and for yourself as a parent, and guidance towards how to parent my child in a way that matches their need. And so,
Yep.
in that instance, getting a diagnosis and understanding the disability and the ability is immensely valuable. And of course, we have some kids that don't meet criteria for a diagnosis, that are more deeply feeling or highly empathic or this or that. Absolutely. And there's a subset where if they meet criteria for a diagnosis, knowing that diagnosis is helpful for the parents who are parenting, for the child who is living it, and for the family system that it's operating in.
Absolutely. I feel like if we don't match the neurotype with what it needs, we are minimizing what's going on for the lived experience of said human. And sometimes
Mhm.
I worry that using language that is less threatening, I'm using air quotes here, but that doesn't send people into this fear of being different, that I worry it delays the support that people might need to really thrive in their life. So, yeah, well said.
Yeah. Yes. And conversely, maybe it's an entry. I'm going to give a counterpoint.
Yeah,
It
please
could
do.
it could be an entry point. If I'm not sure yet, or I feel like, gosh, that couldn't be my kid. I hear this a lot, especially for autism and autism level 1, formerly known as Asperger's, minimal support needed, and or a female presentation. And let me note that that level 1 minimal support, that's the way that the DSM talks about it. It does not match the lived experience of most people experiencing that disability. It can be an entry point if you're feeling like something is different about your child and you're not sure what, and finding communities that maybe talk about a child as being quirky or being deeply empathic can kind of be an entry point, get you on that road. And then as you're continuing to read more, experience more, I would encourage you, if you feel like there's still something that my kid needs more, that's where I would really encourage you to consider evaluation, or consider, I wonder if my child is neurodivergent.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, to your point there, where's the line between being neurodivergent and being neurotypical?
Mhm.
And I think, like most diagnoses identifying neurodivergence, it's about looking for patterns over time and across
Mhm.
settings. Back to my fear of missing kids because we're minimizing their lived experience by calling it something that's not clinical, which again, labels are sometimes helpful, sometimes not. But it's like getting really curious, looking at patterns over time, and figuring out what support you might need. So, the line between being neurodivergent and being neurotypical, it's just a pattern that we're looking at in the impact. So if someone showed you a 10-second clip of a stranger trying to catch their breath and said, "Does this person has asthma?" You'd be like, "Huh? What?" There's no way to know from that clip. So we got to look at patterns over time and the impact that it's having on the life.
Yes, yep, absolutely. What you said about patterns over time across settings, and then the impact, absolutely. And when I think about impact through my training and my lens, I always think about functionality. Is there a marked impact on this person's daily functioning? And when we have children, this can sometimes be a little tricky, because what happens is, as caring parents, we tend to adapt to the needs of our child. And so sometimes we don't realize the level of functional impact that has happened because we have come around and supported our child. And I am not saying that that's bad or wrong. I'm saying sometimes we just do it so naturally and we don't realize the level of support that we're giving. And it is helpful, but it is sometimes masking a little bit the level of impact. This is where being able to have good conversations through an evaluation process can be quite helpful. So one of the things when you go through evaluation, a psychologist or another provider who's doing that assessment is going to do something called a clinical interview. And one of the things that they do in a good clinical interview is they're going to talk to you and tease out what you do as a parent to help your child, how your child's functioning in the home, in the school, in sports, in church, in whatever other life settings that they frequently participate in. And then they're also going to ask you, what do you do? How do you help your child? Right.
Right,
And so
right.
sometimes the functionality is quite clear, right? Wow, the parents are like, I'm so overwhelmed and I don't know what to do. And my other child does not have this kind of need. And then boom, we have very clear functional impact. Other times we have parents or family systems, especially with it's a first child. We see this a lot more with a first child because they're like, I guess this is just parenting.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we don't
Right.
know. Whether, we're
Mhm.
comparing our lived experience to our neighbors or just within our family because it's our first kid and this is the first rodeo.
Yes.
And we don't know nothing. So,
Right.
right, yeah. You don't know what to compare to. And then you're also maybe potentially getting lost in the, oh, should I be comparing? Or,
Mhm.
and then you can go down that train of again reassuring yourself because you're like, oh, I don't want to compare to my neighbor because that's not our family and this and that and whatever. And so, yeah, clinical interviews can help give some context that could be
Mhm.
lacking.
Yes. And so we look at that functionality from that perspective, right? Is there an impact on daily functioning? We also look at how intense that pattern is. And is it persisting despite what you've done to try and address it? And I think there's another piece here too, where a lot of our parents feel like they're not good parents. Like they must have done something
Mm,
wrong. I think a lot of it is a societal pressure. I often say that being a parent is the hardest job in the world, and I stand by that. And I think being a parent of a neurodivergent child can somehow be even harder than the hardest job. And the added element there is that a lot of times society does not realize that your child is impacted. And so they're looking at you and they're like, you're a bad parent. And so then you internalize that, and it can sometimes delay you getting the help and support that you and your partner need as parents, if you happen to be in a partnership. And it can also mean delaying supports for your child. Everyone has the best of intentions, but everyone thinks it's their own fault or like they've done
yeah,
something.
it's the shame cycle and the guilt is so real. I quote know better, and yet I still find myself in that sometimes where you feel like
Hmm.
you're doing so much and you're still not getting the outcome you think you should be getting. Or yeah, I resonate with what you said so much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. So thinking back to how we started off, like, oh, everyone does that. So many reasons why people could be saying that. I think, neurodivergence is how your brain works. It's not some tidy list of symptoms. I mean, yes, those do exist in the DSM. And also then there's real life. Lots of neurodivergent people, we can tell you a long list of things that we do that might be different or perceived as quirky. Of course, none of those things make someone neurodivergent individually, but when you zoom out and see a pattern that's pointing us into understanding how our brain works and processing information. And if you are feeling like, hey, I want some more intel on this pattern, then yeah, find a resource perhaps. We've talked about that a lot through our episodes. Any other insight on that, Morgan?
I just want to name that this road can be long. I think
Yeah.
this should be another tagline. I mean, we just have a podcast of taglines, but
We are collecting them. Yeah, we
yes,
say all the time that's like you're not running a marathon. I mean,
right.
sorry, right? You are
Wait,
running a
wait, you are,
marathon.
you are
You
not a
are.
sprint.
I hate running so much I don't even want to think about it, but this is not a sprint. This
Yes.
is a long road. We need a different analogy that doesn't involve exercise. A long road indeed. A long road indeed.
It's a cross country road trip,
Yeah.
not
Yes.
not a day trip.
Yes. Like a
um
playlist.
Yeah, and this is just a reminder that while this road is long, it also has the potential to be incredibly rewarding. And my personal belief is that I am so thankful that we have neurodivergent people in this world, because when I look across spaces of innovation and great empathy and great art,
Yeah.
there are a combination of brilliant neurotypical people and there are large subsets of neurodivergent people. And the combination of both groups have led to innovation in every sector of business and humanity. And I am so thankful. And so while the road is long, it is also fruitful.
Yeah. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be scary.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, thanks
On
for
that note.
listening. We'll have another new episode out next Tuesday morning. After our Life as a Neurodivergent Adult episode, so many of you reached out saying that it resonated with you, and y'all asked some great questions. So we're going to do another episode talking about our neurodivergence and our experience as neurodivergent adults. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it.
If we are a good fit for you, join our community. We would love to have you. You can find us on Instagram. Dr. Morgan is at Dr. Morgan Beidelman, and Brianne is at It's Brianne Colpitts.
As always, if you have a question or topic you want us to cover, like this one, that's why we did this episode, send us a note. You can message us on Instagram or use the Google form in the show notes.
If you are liking the podcast, we would love a review. Just click 5 stars, throw a few words on there about the value you're getting so the robots can push this out to others. We appreciate that so much. This episode, as always, has been produced and edited by Erica Carpenter, and we are so grateful to you for being a part of our team. Thanks, Erica.
Thanks for joining us. See you next week.
Bye.
So I haven't picked a date yet. Also, if it's not your thing and you're like, that's a lot of humans that I don't know.
Are you
totally fine.
inviting me to dinner? I just can't tell, and I really want to come. So,
Oh, yeah, I'm inviting you to dinner. Just a quick disclosure, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It does not constitute a psychological client relationship and should not be used in place of expert evaluation or therapy.
You can't really mess it up.
Okay,
Just
okay, great.
get upset and say some stuff.
I was saying, I was talking to my mom before this, and I was like, Mom, I gotta go. I gotta go put clothes on. Well, just a shirt, because it's sweatpants day on Thursday. And I was like ranting about something. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna stop myself. I gotta save some rants for the podcast.